Welcome to our Cloud versus On-Premise webinar, a SharePoint platform discussion. My name's Andrew McKenzie, and you've heard from my colleague Paul there. We've been working with SharePoint now for around about 10 years, a little bit over and under for each of us, and we just wanted to share our experience around the different platforms and what's going on in the marketplace. So before we do that, we'll just get started with a little bit of background information for you. So if you have any questions today, a couple of guys have very kindly found the question box for me, but there is one in your webinar, GoToWebinar app launcher, which you might see on possibly on the right-hand side of your screen. We're also going to have some question time, hopefully at the end. If we do happen to stretch time, we'll certainly get back to you on email with answers to your questions. We're also recording this session, and we're going to shoot that up on our YouTube channel and send you all the link afterwards. So first of all, thanks very much for joining us, and over the next 45 minutes we'll hopefully share some good information with you. Now, as I said, Paul and I have been working with SharePoint for quite some time, so we are SharePoint fanatics, and I just really wanted to recap quickly what SharePoint's about. Just one slide here. You know, it's really a place. It's hard to describe because it does so much, and each one of us in our own projects and use cases will do different things with SharePoint. But it's a really great place to collaborate, and that might be collaborating on documents. It could be collaborating with communications as such, things like news feeds. It might be collaborating on different tasks and project sites in SharePoint. We've got a nice ability to discover information intelligently using metadata and search, and maybe even some dashboards to investigate and understand how things are going on in our organisation and what information sits where and with who rapidly in ways that we couldn't do without something like SharePoint. We've also got nice access. You know, if your organisation supports it and allows it, your sites can be published externally, and we can get access when we're at home, on the road, you know, just via a browser into key information in our organisation. And finally, sharing information is so much easier. And I must admit, when I do think back to early days of SharePoint, maybe back to 2007 and even 2010, SharePoint ironically wasn't the easiest thing to share information on, but certainly from 2013 onwards, you know, Microsoft have really made big gains in how we do that, and certainly sharing information not just with our colleagues, but perhaps to partners, community members, suppliers, is far easier than it ever was. So we're going to touch on a few different platform options today. Things have been changing in the marketplace over the years, and it's one of the core questions we get asked is where should I utilise SharePoint from? Is it something I should use in the cloud? Now, when we're talking cloud today, we're largely going to be focusing on the concept of Office 365, SharePoint Online. Okay, so SharePoint Online is a part of Microsoft's Office 365 software as a service platform. After that, we're also going to be touching a little bit on the on-premise side of things, and there's been a major release in recent times of SharePoint Server 2016. I had a question at a recent event where somebody said to me, "Oh, I thought Microsoft was doing away with SharePoint." My view on that is no way. It's core to a lot of their strategy moving forward, and a recent release of SharePoint 2016 on-premise demonstrates where they're trying to head. So we'll be talking a little bit about SharePoint as an on-premise platform, the pros and cons around that. And the third option we'll talk about today a little bit further is realistically the SharePoint hybrid scenario. So where we're leveraging both on-premise and Office 365. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back a little bit later on and share some questions with you and talk about other things we're doing. But I'm really going to hand over at this point in time to my colleague Paul. Paul's one of our consultants at Professional Advantage. He's one of the guys who actually deploys the solutions, designs the solutions, supports the solutions, and really make sure that the customers that we work with get the best out of their SharePoint platforms. And he's going to take you through a little bit of a journey and how he sees these different platforms and the benefits and perhaps some of the limitations of each of these different ways to deploy or utilise SharePoint. So over to you, Paul.
Great, thanks Andrew. So I'll basically get straight into talking about where we see SharePoint Online's benefits lie. And the first thing that we can really talk about is, and one of the key benefits of going to the cloud in general, is the fact that it's low maintenance. So there's no more servers to manage, there's no updates to apply, or even new servers to provision if you want to scale up. Everything is managed by Microsoft on their global data center network. So, and not only are there infrastructure maintenance benefits, but also day-to-day user administration is made a lot easier. We're able to add a new user, give them a mailbox, provide them with access to SharePoint, all within a few clicks and all in the browser. So that's a really powerful side of, moving to the cloud just in general. But SharePoint Online really showcases those benefits. Then we've got sort of a flow-on effect from the fact that there's sort of less to maintain is the pricing. So with SharePoint Online being a managed service, so software as a service, costing is pushed to a more scalable subscription model, and it basically helps you avoid the initial capex of putting together infrastructure, hiring staff, and moving that to an operating expense. And the really nice thing is that we're able to fine-tune the subscriptions. So you'll have scenarios where some people, especially in your office, corporate office locations, they'll need access to a mailbox. They'll need access to Office, all the Office applications, as well as SharePoint, and we can have that granularity. But at the same time, people that are on the road, we may have different users that really just need access to either SharePoint or email, and you're able to really fine-tune that to help reduce your overall costs. And then one of the really nice things is just the reliability of the platform. So you can see we've got 99.9%. So that's the financially backed SLA that Microsoft provides with Office 365, including SharePoint Online. However, having said that, Microsoft's actually provided better uptime than that, and it's been 99.98 over the last 3 quarters. And the information around that uptime is quite transparently provided by Microsoft through their Office 365 Trust Center. And sort of on top of that, financially backed SLA, we've also got built-in redundancy and failover of data centers. So with Microsoft having data centers covering most of the globe right now, and 2 in Australia, we have built-in redundancy and failover between the 2 data centers.
So Paul, just a quick shout out for those who aren't familiar. Where are those Australian data centres located?
Yeah, so the 2 data centres in Australia are located in Sydney and in Melbourne. And basically the failover happens transparently to the user, so you would no longer have to worry about downtime.
So that could be a big saving on disaster recovery compared to what people might have looked at as well. When if we're thinking about pricing, you got the dollar symbol there. I would say that DR can be quite expensive if you don't have something in place previously.
Yeah, absolutely right. That's something that most on-premise environments actually don't even consider, and when they do, like you mentioned, they don't really consider the price that true DR, the price that it comes with. And so finally, we've got one of the most touted features of sort of going to online is the fact that you can get a lot more new features being rolled out. So being a cloud version, we see new features being released by Microsoft in months rather than years, and in some cases even weeks. So instead of costly updates that are managed internally by your IT team, we've got a choice of really 2 release cycles. There's a standard release cycle and a first release cycle. So the differences sort of basically include or involve having the standard release cycle where you get new features rolled out after they've been tested by sort of other users and Microsoft, or you've got a first release cycle where you can actually get the latest and greatest and have control over specific users that get those features. and have it go through a testing process internally before it gets rolled out to your broader business, which is really nice, being able to get new features faster, but you're not necessarily giving up, the fact that you can actually test those.
So Paul, it sounds like SharePoint Online is pretty cool. I know we work with a lot of customers around SharePoint Online and helping them migrate to that platform. In your view of projects you've worked on in let's call it the last year or two, what percentage of deployments would you see going to the cloud today?
Yeah, look, over the sort of last year or so, we've really seen a increase in SharePoint Online because sort of as part of all these benefits, it's really a lower barrier to entry. So at this stage, we're probably looking at 70% or more sort of projects being delivered with SharePoint Online, either in its entirety or at least some components on SharePoint Online, just because of the fact that there's so much less CapEx involved, and it's a lot easier to get up and running. With the good, however, there are some limitations with SharePoint Online, which I'll sort of touch on now. So, moving to the cloud is great to provide, availability of files anywhere at any time. But the flip side is that there is going to be additional network traffic, and so bandwidth requirements do need to be considered, especially when we're dealing with large files. So Microsoft, they do have their data centers, but at the same time, by moving everything to the cloud, it's not on your local infrastructure, and so that's something that does need to be considered. But with syncing technologies with OneDrive for Business, they can be sort of reduced, but it is something to be mindful of. Then what we also have is, as part of the sort of more constant updates that we get from Microsoft, and while it does ease the pressure on IT, there may be times where you need to extend the functionality of SharePoint Online, and this is where, by having a sort of a shared platform that is managed by Microsoft, there's fewer customizations that you can sort of make to the platform. So this is where, when we want to do advanced customizations, they may either, may not be possible, but more likely it requires the use of additional services, including Microsoft's own infrastructure as a service, so Azure, so where you may need to essentially scale out to introduce more, I guess, services as part of your sort of overall ecosystem to support customizations. We'll talk about some of the most common uses when it comes to SharePoint Online. The first is what we commonly sort of refer to as ready-to-go portals. So features that we see in SharePoint Online, like we're seeing in the slide right now, we've got a sort of a new SharePoint homepage. We have sort of modern lists and the modern library experience. These are basically pre-configured by Microsoft to address, I guess, the three screens. So we're able to address the desktop, we're able to address the tablet, as well as mobile devices. And Professional Advantage definitely leverages these experiences to get portals up and running faster, to help solve problems like company-wide communication, as well as document management with very limited customization costs associated. And as a sort of sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Paul, just a quick question on that. And it's always an interesting one, I find, but I kind of get the sense in a way that Microsoft with the SharePoint Online platform are sort of productizing it a little more than perhaps in the past, where it really was a platform, and you're kind of getting these, as you say, ready-to-go portals. Does that mean people potentially need to spend less time worrying about the branding side of things? What's your view on that?
Yeah, look, absolutely. It is a place where, traditionally to be able to support an environment where you can get, like we're seeing, a mobile-ready application, you would have to get developers involved. Right now, it is definitely beneficial to tap into these sort of this templated model that SharePoint Online brings. It will depend on your requirements, but absolutely it's something that we, even sort of working on SharePoint and delivering SharePoint projects, we try to tap into that as much as possible, because obviously we want to get more functionality with less effort, like any business really. And I guess as a flow-on effect to the fact that a lot of this functionality is sort of ready to go, we've also got greatly improved collaboration within SharePoint Online, and that's a common sort of use case for it. It's really easy to conduct internal and even external collaboration. We no longer need to worry about firewall settings. There's no additional fees to collaborate with sort of non-affiliated users outside your organization, and you can even do things like set expiration times for when you do share content, so that it automatically removes access if you'd like to enforce stricter governance. And most businesses are looking to expose more information with their suppliers and vendors just to be more transparent in their workings, and SharePoint Online is really great from that perspective. And as part of, I guess, putting all these things together, since SharePoint Online is part of a broader platform of Office 365, we have a lot of built-in integrations with other applications like email, Delve, which is a sort of a search-driven sort of homepage for your content, as well as OneDrive for business. What we'll do now is quickly take a look at sort of how that integration looks like within a SharePoint Online site. So as we saw on the slide previously, this is the new SharePoint homepage. So this is one area where you can see that all the SharePoint sites that I have access to, including all the content that I have either modified or I have viewed, is shown in an easy-to-use sort of view. So this is one of the benefits of the new features that get rolled out. But then as part of the integration platform, when we load the app launcher in the top left, you can see that there's a fair few tiles here. But really the aim of this app launcher is to provide a consistent experience so that you can access all the applications within your Office 365 platform. So that includes things like Mail in the top left, the calendar, which is also part of Mail. But when we try to extend beyond sort of say SharePoint and traditional emails, document management, we've also got features like Planner, which gives us the ability to look at really lightweight task management. And when we need that sort of more power, we've also got Project Online. And so you can see how all these tiles, they integrate quite tightly. I'm able to log in with the one account and basically look at all the apps. And all of this, again, is driven by that subscription model where we're able to control which users have access to things like Power BI or Project Online, and which ones have access to the compliance features within SharePoint as well, and Office 365.
So that's a nice look at the Office 365 platform application launcher. Now, of course, most of the customers we work with do tend to go with the enterprise bundles, which include a number of those services, like an Office 365 E1 plan or an E3 plan or an E5. But you can just go SharePoint Online. And if you purely just went SharePoint Online, you wouldn't see the rest of those services. But we do find most people are on a journey and a cloud strategy. If they are going to go with SharePoint Online, they will often move their mail into the cloud, and we'll help them with that migration. And these days even Microsoft help with a lot of those migration services as well, depending on your organisation. So that's a neat look. If you haven't seen Office 365 before and you were thinking it's just about the Office applications, it certainly can be a lot more than that. Back to you, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and all of this is to really improve and sort of streamline the user experience, regardless of what application they're using. So we'll just jump back to the slides now. And so now we'll start talking about SharePoint Server. So this offering, obviously being an on-premise offering from Microsoft, can either be on-premise in your own data center, or as we've sort of highlighted, leveraging infrastructure as a service which would be in the sort of more hosted model. We'll run through a couple of the benefits, sort of probably more specific to SharePoint Server. And the first one, where we've sort of talked about a templated model. With SharePoint Server, I guess we tap into the traditional background of SharePoint, which is more of a platform. So we've got access to the full stack, and so therefore we're able to have more granular customizations and integrations with SharePoint Server. Whether these include custom third-party applications or other line of business applications, there's an existing sort of ecosystem of products that we can leverage for integrations, or there's also the option to build your own. So that's one of the powers of SharePoint Server. Common scenarios we deal with at Professional Advantage include creating things like shared navigation across multiple applications. So similar to the app launcher that we just saw, being able to provide an app launcher or global navigation across all your applications, whether they be Microsoft provided, custom built, just so that we try to achieve that same seamless experience for users. And another area that we definitely tap into is the power of SharePoint Search. So this can be done to improve the searching capabilities of other content or document management systems, and in turn it's all designed to be able to provide a better user experience story, which then helps user adoption. Then
when you talk about other data repositories there, can they be applications, or do you just mean file shares, or just to expand on that for me, Paul?
Yeah, so it's really both. So in some cases it could involve tapping into other document management systems, whether that be the file share or a system on its own, and setting up an integration point. In other cases it can actually be things like custom .NET applications that have been either purchased or built, and the integration can be built in there as well.
Thanks, terrific.
And look, a part of that ability to have full customizations goes hand in hand with the next real benefit, is that we get full server access. So having full server access is, it can definitely be a perk at times, because you're able to fully manage your server farm, and it really lets you scale up and also out and address specific requirements. Some of which we at Professional Advantage commonly see are things like data sovereignty. Data centers in Australia are relatively new offering in SharePoint Online, and in some cases certain legislation dictates that we have to have data located in a certain data center, and so you're able to do that. And then we also have things like records management, where we can have very specific requirements, and full server access lets us address those, obviously with additional effort to set those up.
And I guess with full server access, Paul, if something goes wrong, it's on your responsibility to fix it, which can be a blessing and a curse. It can be a blessing because you're not relying upon someone else. It can be a curse because your management will be shouting at you rather than Microsoft if you're the sysadmin trying to bring things back. But it certainly gives you a greater insight to the platform when something goes wrong, and a bit more control to resolve things, I'm guessing.
Yeah, look, that's right, Andrew. The fact is that with that access, you also get that responsibility, and it's something that if you need those customizations, so being able to have full customizations, would dictate that you have full server access. They very much go hand in hand, and it is a valid point that we're maintaining that responsibility, as opposed to SharePoint Online, where we're pushing that responsibility to Microsoft. Yep.
And questions I've had before with different clients have been a little bit around performance. How about running things in the cloud versus on premise? What's your thoughts on that? Is it dependent on your organisation, or how do you view that?
Yeah, look, that probably ties in with the next point of global presence, which is where we have identified bandwidth requirements being a sort of a limitation with SharePoint Online, having a sort of a single farm, all your users that will access SharePoint and all its content being located, say, in the same city, in some cases in the same office, having an on-premise server in that environment is obviously going to be faster than having to connect to a data center, even if it is in the same city, because it's all on the same network. But having said that, where SharePoint Server is able to sort of push beyond that is that in most cases, having a sort of a shared data center with SharePoint Online may be sort of sufficient. When we get to the scale of having a global presence, SharePoint can actually, or SharePoint Server can be set up so that we span multiple geographical locations and basically replicate data between certain locations, and that helps us ensure good performance and limited sort of bandwidth requirements for the users. But absolutely, it's a very specific requirement, and obviously, like we've sort of discussed with the full server access, it comes at sort of additional effort versus what we see with SharePoint Online.
Thanks, Paul.
And then finally, one of the strongest benefits of SharePoint Server that we most commonly see with sort of government organizations or organizations that deal with children, where the information is quite tightly regulated, is that on-premise SharePoint environments give you greater auditing capabilities. So you've got the options to build upon. So hand in hand with full customizations, we're able to extend to support specific compliance requirements that obviously vary from industry and even region, but we're actually able to support specific requirements like being able to track when people have viewed a document, have the ability to have users sign off when they've read a document, and also have tighter control over where, how people are using documents as well. Being able to track all of that is, one of the strengths of SharePoint Server. And obviously, with the same as we discussed with SharePoint Online, there are limitations when it comes to SharePoint Server. The first, which we have touched on as we've discussed SharePoint Server as well as SharePoint Online, is the resourcing cost. So while on-premise SharePoint gives you really great customization capabilities that let you support unique requirements and your specific needs, it does come at the cost of additional internal resources. So this can include obviously the staff to manage a SharePoint farm, but also the hardware and the software costs that are associated with the SharePoint farm as well. And we've got staff that need to be responsible for building the farm, administer the IT infrastructure, administrators to manage the SharePoint farm itself, and even just support staff that are available to assist end users. That's definitely something that is one of the biggest limitations of SharePoint Server, but at the same time, it's something that you can manage, but it depends on your requirements. If SharePoint Server sort of fits your needs based on the benefits we saw, and sort of going hand in hand with that, when we talk about sort of ongoing costs, there's also the ongoing configuration that's required with SharePoint Server. So while Microsoft is aiming to bring the improved release cycle of SharePoint Online back to on-premise, it does require additional ongoing maintenance in the form of applying updates and also configuration effort to enable things like collaboration with external users outside your organization. Where that was a out-of-the-box feature in SharePoint Online, with SharePoint on-premise, it's not enabled by default, and so there is additional configuration that does need to happen. So that's one of the limitations, another of the limitations of SharePoint Server.
And Paul, just on release cycles, I know that Microsoft sort of released SharePoint 2016, and they said, hey, we're going to try and bring it in line with sort of cloud release cycles, so you're getting updates just like people do in the cloud, a lot more frequent. Are we seeing that as a reality?
Look, we're not seeing that as a reality as of yet, and I think that's probably to be expected. So while it's a great aim, because SharePoint Server is the first version of SharePoint to actually change its release cycle from a multi-year release cycle to something that the end goal is to be sort of quarterly kind of updates. It's definitely something that we haven't seen yet, and I believe the next expected release is actually in sort of early 2017. So really it is something to be mindful of, that ongoing configuration. You may not even see the release of features that you are anticipating until Microsoft sort of gets a bit more mature with this release cycle.
So they're still at this stage delivering probably more on that cloud-first strategy with feature releases, but they do have a vision to expedite the releases to the on-premise server if you're on 2016, is my understanding. So.
Yeah, that's right. So cloud-first, mobile-first is still the sort of strategy, where SharePoint Server obviously is going to get releases, hopefully moving forward in a more rapid release cycle. And now we'll jump to the common uses that we see for SharePoint Server. So they are more specific than the SharePoint Online sort of common use cases that we see. The first is really what we sort of collectively call custom portals. So the concept of a custom portal really involves building on top of SharePoint as a platform. So rather than tapping into the templated model of SharePoint Online's ready-to-go portals, we're looking to address specific requirements that aren't available in those templates and adding that customization. These typically include adhering to things like strict style guides. So here we can see an example of very specific branding that we can see, including sort of a mobile view on the left image. And this commonly, or very commonly I should say, extends to support, we see the requirement extends to support things like accessibility standards. So when you have sort of sites and you're extending these portals to be things like extranets, there's a lot of the time requirements to support accessibility standards like WCAG. This could be to support things like high contrast, screen readers and things like that. So that's one of the common uses we see with custom portals. And then sort of following on from that, integration is typically the next logical step that we see in such custom portals. Because custom portals and SharePoint Server as a platform is able to tightly integrate with other applications, it gives us the ability to use SharePoint as a central dashboard or repository with its integration with other line of business applications. So at Professional Advantage, we've helped to deliver integrations like linking CRM and SharePoint through business processes and document processing automation, and also things like interactive visualizations where the end user can slice and dice information, all surfaced from custom .NET web applications. So really, it's that integration layer is definitely one of the strong suits of SharePoint Server, because you've got that sort of full access. And then finally, SharePoint's able to support specific compliance requirements, and we know these are different, based on where your organization is and what it does, what industry it's in, which region it's in. So, a couple of examples include, we've looked at record compliance can be provided by customizing SharePoint to become the records repository itself, to support things like two-stage deletions, audit trails, SharePoint's able to support that as a platform. But then it can also be used to enhance existing records management solutions. So rather than looking to replace them, we can actually integrate with SharePoint and leverage the benefits that SharePoint brings to the table. And one of the most common sort of examples of that is SharePoint Search, which greatly improves the discoverability of content so that you can continue using records management systems that you have, but improve the search of those by tapping into SharePoint Server as well. And so now, having talked about both SharePoint Online and SharePoint Server, we'll talk a little bit about the hybrid setup. So really the combination of SharePoint Online and SharePoint Server give us the SharePoint hybrid environment. And really it's about leveraging the strengths of both platforms to create a hybrid environment that addresses the specific needs of the organization. Some of the benefits, however, include things like federated search. So users in the cloud and your on-premises domain environment are able to obtain search results and include content from both locations. So rather than having two disconnected search engines, you're able to have one federated search, and with SharePoint Server 2016, you're actually able to have a unified set of search results as well. So all the search results are sort of intertwined between one another. Then we have the benefit of tapping into business connectivity services. So business connectivity services gives us a way to make line of business data available through it as a service into applications that either use SharePoint or within SharePoint themselves through things like external lists, including SharePoint Online. So you're able to surface that information into SharePoint, making it sort of more of a central repository or even a dashboard. Then we've also got single sign-on. So, whether users are connected to the corporate network or to Office 365, they only have to authenticate once. In any session that they connect to, they're able to access resources both on-premises, on your SharePoint server farm, as well as within SharePoint Online without having multiple login prompts. So that's definitely one of the strong benefits of hybrid, and it really helps with user adoption and just getting users on board without getting in their way.
And Paul, as I understand it, with the latest version of SharePoint, SharePoint 2016, that hybrid model is a lot more seamless than it was with SharePoint 2013, and we can take advantage of things like the Delve profiles and that machine learning that's surfacing, Delve-based content, and also our OneDrive integration. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So when we looked at the app launcher earlier on within Office 365, with the introduction of SharePoint Server 2016, we've introduced, or Microsoft's introduced a lot of features that make that integration a lot more seamless with hybrid. So we can have things like workloads that require confidential information to stay on-premise, but at the same time we can tap into Delve, which is sort of Microsoft's sort of machine learning platform to be used for basic document management. And so SharePoint 2016 is definitely built for cloud and built for hybrid. Previous versions, there's always been a bit of a disconnect. SharePoint 2016 is really merging with the cloud to offer the most seamless experience to end users.
So I know a recent project we did with one of Australia's largest not-for-profit organisations. They had a non-negotiable situation with any data that pertained to children that they worked with had to remain in a specific server room on premise, and that's where the beauty of the hybrid model resides for them. They're able to use all the collaborative features and the quick release cycle and the easy administration of SharePoint Online as their intranet, if you like, and the data just relating, that key data relating to the kids they work with stays where they need it to. Yet it's all surfaced and seamless to the user in a single interface. They don't know the difference of where these two different platforms sit and work. So it's a pretty neat scenario. Isn't needed for everybody, but really nice to take advantage of if you do have requirements that suit. So, Paul, just in the interest of time, I've got a few questions I'd like to just run by you if you don't mind, and I'd just encourage the audience, if you've got some questions you'd like to ask, certainly fill out that question section. We'll kick a couple off here. So, Paul, let's just flick ahead to the next question. Can I control the rate of change in SharePoint Online? So you did touch on this a little bit earlier, but I know it's one that comes up all the time. Change management's an important thing. Just a quick recap on that. How do I control that rate of change?
Yeah, absolutely. So Microsoft gives you the ability to control the rate of change through sort of really two models. So you've got the ability to be on a first release cycle, which lets you really review upcoming changes. And when we're talking about reviewing the changes, we can focus, configure SharePoint Online so that specific users get these new changes. And so that lets you go through the process of testing those changes, putting together communication around the change management and change control aspect of it, so that you can be mindful that if SharePoint Online changes something greatly, we're still able to test it, validate it, have it be communicated to the broader business, and sort of deploy the features out.
Okay, great. And look, the next one here, just running through these quickly here. How many servers do I need if I deploy on premise? Is it just a single server? What does it look like?
Yeah, it's basically how long is a piece of string. So there are many considerations that we have to keep in mind, and I'll touch on sort of a couple of these. And so really we've got things like high availability. Are you storing critical information within your SharePoint farm? If so, we likely need to have some sort of redundancy. Obviously, this is something that Microsoft provides in SharePoint Online, but it's something that we need to consider if it's on-premise. Then with the release of SharePoint 2016, we've got the concept of, for example, min roles. Min roles is where we've got the ability to have more focused servers, so we can scale out search specifically and really build out the servers. So while our SharePoint sort of web servers may just be one server, one back-end server, our search services could require 3 servers, because we really want to sort of scale out, because we have hundreds of gigs worth of data that we need indexed. And then things like performance and Office web apps, which is sort of now evolved into Office Online. All of these, that it all depends on the specific requirements you have. So you can go anywhere from, a single server farm, up to as many servers as you can sort of throw at it. But commonly we see servers anywhere between sort of 2, sort of up to sort of 5 to 7 that support things like these considerations.
Okay, so it sounds like give us a call and we'll help you define what's right for you. So just quickly, in the interest of time, a really quick one, Paul, if you can answer it in short, and otherwise we can email an answer. But Mark's got a question here. Can SharePoint Online support any HTML or jQuery customizations, or is it fully locked down? We there, Paul?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so SharePoint Online does support HTML and jQuery customizations. The sort of the degree with which you're comfortable with, web development, the more comfortable you are, you can actually make it look like it's a seamless part of SharePoint. So it's definitely something that we can support, or SharePoint Online supports.
Okay, great. Well, we're just ticking a minute over here, so I'm just going to skip through a couple of these other questions, and we can answer them if need be that we had shot down. These are just our questions, whether we need a SharePoint administrator and some other things, but Paul did cover them. We do have some questions that you can reach us on inquiries@pa.com.au. Just reference this webinar and we'll get back to you. We've got another one here from Michelle coming through. Can I restrict users with access to SharePoint Online working in the office accessing SharePoint from their home? We'll get back to you with an answer to that. But we've also got an event coming up in a couple of weeks' time if you're in Sydney and Melbourne. If you wanted to come along and meet us, if you're in those locations, you can register at pa.com.au/events, where we're talking a little more through Office 365. But certainly thanks for your participation today. We do want to let people go if they need to, but just a quick one, if people do want to stick on for a couple of more minutes there. Paul, can we answer Michelle's question here? Can I restrict users with access to SharePoint Online working in the office accessing SharePoint from their home?
Okay, so it's something that, based on location alone, it's not something that sort of SharePoint specifically will support, and we're sort of delving into, I guess, a concept called rights management. And really, rights management is more a matter of securing the file against the user, so that even if someone downloads a file, so SharePoint Online will work similar to a file share, where you can lock down folders and files themselves, but as soon as someone copies that file, it's no longer secure. What rights management lets us do is actually tie the security to the file. So it's sort of like password protecting a file without actually having to use a password, because people are able to log in with their normal accounts and they're able to access that document wherever they are. It does, however, mean that they are able to access it from home, but the security does follow the file. So location-based is not something that is supported, but you are able to add additional sort of encryption and security on the file itself.
So I think that's where maybe there's a potential to consider either a hybrid or an on-premise solution where you're not publishing certain data externally, Paul, and it's only accessible when you're in the work network.
Yes, correct. So that's where hybrid would be able to sort of address that.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you everybody for your time today. Really hope you enjoyed the session. It was just a high-level look at the different options that are available to you. More than happy to answer your questions offline, and would love to see you at any of our on-premise events that we do host. Thank you once again, and we hope to see you at one of our sessions in the future.